welcome back. Gosh, we're in week 7. Are we in week 7 or is it week 6? Actually, I think it's week 7
Yeah.
of distance learning. And we're back with Shannon Horn. She has become a regular on our little show every week. So we appreciate you, Shannon, for all of your advice. We always are excited about this segment because we learn a lot from you. So welcome back. And we have some questions for you. I'm going to start with I was just writing a note for next week to the community, and here we are with this stay-at-home order being lifted somewhat anyway this coming week. And I started thinking we just got used to what we have, and now we're all going to have to adapt and adjust to another new normal. So, what do you anticipate, or what advice do you have for whether you're parents who are heading back to work? Physically back to work, or whether you are just being able to go outside more, you don't have to stay at home. What advice do you have for families as we adjust to this next phase of our lives?
I think it might not be a bad idea. And I think we hit on this a little bit last week, but one of the things that I've been working through with myself and also some friends is to begin to make a list of activities and rate your comfort level, like sleepovers. Definite no. Hangouts at a friend's house. Maybe. With what restrictions? Okay, maybe as long as we're in the front yard, 6 feet apart. Like, begin to lay those out before it comes up to it. Like, so for instance, I'm starting to look at, well, what would it look like if I went back to my office? Maybe a little bit. Well, here's the thing. I can't just make that plan. Oh, I mean, I guess I could, but I'm not going to make that plan by myself because I also have a student at home who's, distance learning. I have a husband who's also working from home. A daughter, in addition to distance learning, is a high schooler, so she also works. So there's getting her back and forth to work. And so I think we're beginning to look at, okay, well, obviously we can't just all go do whatever we want to do, but we live in a community together, right? The three of us. And then, we're having to look at well, what would we feel comfortable with? Like with our friends and with her friends. And before a parent calls and says, hey, we're going to do this party, come over to our house. We have to think, well, are we ready for that? Are we ready to go into someone's home just yet? If we're going to go out and about, I mean, I know some people have been more, restrictive, for lack of a better word, on their stay at home. So some people have really sheltered in place and not come out at all. Some have been, well, I'll go out a little bit, I'll go to the store, I'll maybe run to Home Depot, get paint, or I'm going to run to the office and grab something and go back home. So some people have been a little bit more free, and then others maybe even freer than that. And so I think there was this new normal, and you kind of had it in your head, this is what I feel comfortable with. But I think now you're going to have to start making a list of those things that you anticipate. If your kid, let's say your kid's in a sport, well, let's say the coach says, okay, well, we're going to go ahead and have a drill practice. Well, are you comfortable with that? Are you ready for your kid to go back at that? Because what you don't want is it springing on you 5 minutes before, hey, we're going to have a drill practice. And you're like, wait, what? I don't know if I'm ready for that. I don't know if I'm comfortable with that. Better to think ahead. I used to tell my kids when they were little, please don't ask me in front of your friends if they can stay the night here. Because I don't like to, it feels like a lot of pressure when your little friend is standing there staring at me and you're going, can they please come over? Can they please come over and stay over? And I'm like, I feel like I can't say no. They're looking right at me. So I think if parents, can think about that ahead of time, what is my comfort level? Am I ready to go back to work? Are we ready to have people in our driveway? Are we ready to have people, do we want to go get haircuts? Do we feel comfortable moving more freely? I think if you would just begin to make a list of those things and then rate them, 5 being absolutely, I'm totally comfortable with that. 1, I'm not comfortable at all with that. And then begin to have those conversations before you just have a kid standing at the door going, can I come in? And you're going, I don't know if we're ready for that just yet. So I think if you could prepare in advance some of those thoughts and then think it through. And of course, depending on the age of your child, depends on how much you might want to engage them in that process. Obviously your older kids, you could engage them a little bit more in the thought process where, with your 2 or 3-year-old, it might be more like, this is what we're doing.
Thank you.
Sure.
I was reading about the 5 stages of grief that we've been talking about. And I guess David Kessler, who's involved in writing about that, has added a 6th stage now. He's calling it finding meaning. And I thought that may really apply to what we're talking about as we transition our kids back in. He's talking about more of a peaceful, hopeful experience that we're, looking forward to in the future. But then I was thinking, our world isn't really set up like that. It's more like just move on, get it over with, and, get back into another new normal. So how is it going to be when we go back in explaining this, the meaning of all of this to our children?
I think that, yeah, it's so interesting. Like just this past weekend in our services, our lead pastor used the movie Inside Out. Do you remember that kids movie?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And just how culturally we're just kind of like, well, we moved. It's going to be great. Like your new friends and new school. It's going to be so amazing. It's going to be wonderful. But before we can get to it's so amazing, it's so wonderful, there's a grief of what was lost, and I think there is still that thing of, you may have kids and students. I mean, I know we do in our house of that things that aren't coming back. We can't recover some of those things back. And so to find meaning in that and to look for like ways to grieve that and to say, I'm sad about that. But what I'm learning from that is I'm not going to take it for granted. I'm going to not take for granted the time that I get to spend with someone or the physical touch of, a grandma's hug or, a friend's hug or, all those things. And to say, hey, from this, we can learn that, hey, there's some things that we need to not take for granted. Those special moments, the vacations, the special ceremonies that we have every year that sometimes I think, after year, it becomes like, oh, here we go, another award ceremony. But now it's like, oh my gosh, like it's not the same to do that virtually. I mean, honestly, we're going to have one next week, a virtual award ceremony. I'm like, I mean, it's better than nothing, but it's not going to be the same as being able to hang with all those families and all their kids and to be able to congratulate people and to hang out afterwards and talk and visit. And so I think finding meaning in that place of saying, hey, let's not forget that like this happened. And what it can do for us is to have a heart of gratitude, of the ability to move around and be more free, the ability to have play dates and hangouts, and the ability to go to an award ceremony or to a parent teacher conference. I mean, I think about how many times do parents like, but now you're like, oh, if only I could see my kid's teacher, what I would say to them. Mm-hmm. And I think it would be nice for us to take some time to think about that. One of the questions that we did these past 2 weeks in our services is 2 weeks ago, we asked people, coulda, shoulda, woulda. What is the one thing that you took for granted before this time? What do you miss most?
Yeah.
And then this week we asked them, what was the best thing about the pandemic? Like, what's been the best thing so far? What's something that you've learned? What's something that you hope to hold on to before you go back? And so I think, to be able to take some time out and to pause, to journal that, to make a note of it, even just talk around the dinner table about like, hey, what has this time taught us? What have we taken for granted? What do we look forward to? And again, I think we've said this several times is, grieve what you've lost, because for some things, your 8th graders, there are some things that they're not going to get back. It's just, it is what it is. It's not coming back. It's not going to look the way they had hoped or that they wanted. And so I think there is a grief in that, and then be able to find meaning, but that your life will go on and it will be good. And this too shall pass. And it will not, I saw a picture this week. It was from that guy we talked about before, John Acuff. It was a picture of a big circle and it said your life. And then it said this moment. And just again, putting that into perspective of like, you got to feel that moment. You got to grieve it. But truly, in the overall big picture, this too shall pass. It will be part of your story, but it's not all of your story.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's good. Thank you. Yeah.
I do weekly chats with each grade level. And one of the things I noticed this week, I was asking them the question, what's the first thing you want to do when, the stay at home is lifted, and where would you like to go eat? And I noticed some of the talk went in a very negative direction, even to the point where some kids were talking about what a horrible job the government's doing, and all these things. And so I just want to remind parents, and if you can speak on this, that your kids are listening to you, because usually when that sort of talk starts to come out, in my heart, I feel like that they're just repeating kind of what they've heard at home. And so, and then I was in a webinar this week, and it was just another kind of wake up call. If we keep kind of, oh, this is just bad, and we're losing this and that, that's how our children will feel and react to it. Instead, let's change that narrative and say, you know what? This is a unique time. You are resilient learners. Look what all you've done. And, just kind of like you were talking about making a plan, but I do believe like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If I tell a kid 100 times that they're bad, they're going to be bad. If I tell them 100 times, wow, you're the best, they're going to be good. So I just, can you just talk about the importance of the language parents are using around their children, and like even kind of their own fears and how that comes out, how they can talk to their kids and make this not a horrible, scary, negative thing, but, something that we're going to learn a lot from, and that they can do this. Because I worry about those parents that are so frightened themselves when the stay-at-home order is lifted. I think we're going to have the gamut. We're going to have the parent that's like, go, do whatever you want, sleepovers, whatever. And then we're going to have the ones that are still so afraid.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and that's true. I mean, and we've talked about this, I think, almost every week, that you have all these temperaments, right? People have different temperaments, so different personality bents, like some bent more towards this side, some more towards this side. And then everybody has experience, and they all have different things happening in their home, right? So last week, I think we talked about if my economic viability is most at stake, that is what is trumping everything in my mind, versus if I have a person in my life who I love and care about, who I worry is immunosuppressed and could possibly die from this, I might be more driven by the desire to keep the infection at bay. And so, or mental health or whatever. So I think whatever's driving us, that's whatever's in the driving seat, that's what's pushing our agenda of what we think would be right to do in this situation. And I think one of the things that I have been reminded on a regular basis, and honestly, I don't get it right, and when it comes back at me, when my kids parrot back, because they will, I go, wait a minute, that's not what I said to do. But I'm like, oh, right. But that's what I do. And we tell people, kids so often, and we don't want to believe this is true, but it is true. They learn by what we do and who we are, not by what we say. So if I say, don't do this, don't treat people like this, and then they hear me in the other room blasting somebody, I can't believe this, and this is so stupid, and I'm berating people, but I'm telling them not to berate someone, they're going to do what I do. They're not going to do what I say, and, we always say that, don't do what I do. You do what I say. Well, that doesn't work. We all learn from what we see, and that's the patterns of behaviors that we pick up. And so I think just to be able to say hey, if that's coming out, I probably need to be aware that that's going on in me. And one of the things that we talk about often, and again, I mean, obviously I'm a person of faith, so I have a specific opinion of this as well, but I do really believe that whatever's going on inside you is what's coming out of you. And so if you are not at peace, and if you are not calm, if you're not trusting that this is going to be okay, then what comes out of you is not going to be, it's not like you can be at peace here and then, not at peace inside your heart. And then what comes out of your mouth is total peace and calm. Chaos comes out, even if you are trying to wrap it up in a nice bow. I think the intensity of your emotion, or maybe how you're responding to other people, I think that comes out to our kids. And I think, to be able to look and go, hey, what do I need to do to monitor my interior? And I know we've talked about this a lot, but it begs repeating, take care of your own interior world. If you are in chaos, if you are stressed, if you are amped to the max, if you feel like you want to take someone's head off because of how they're responding to this, and then you need to take some time and say, what am I putting into me that's creating? It's not going to change anything. Like being all amped up about whether we open or don't open, or people are wearing a mask or they're not wearing a mask, it's not going to help. Like the best thing is to do what you need to do for you and for your family to be healthy emotionally and relationally. What do you need to do to be at peace in your home? And if that means that you stop worrying about whether or not people wear masks or don't wear masks, or whether they're going out or they're not going out, or whether we should be back in or we shouldn't be back in, it's like you can just get so amped up. And so whatever you can do to ratchet down your own emotion in that and to bring it into check, I think will really benefit our kids, because we don't want them living in this negative. I still remember picking up a lot of that from my parents when I was younger. There were some things going on in our house. Like my cousin was one of the Iranian hostages. Now, my parents, I was young enough. My parents did not talk. I was in third grade. My parents did not talk to me. Hey, Shannon, I mean, I knew he was there, but I didn't know everything that was going on. We didn't have 24/7 news. I wasn't up watching the news, but I could feel the tension in the house with my parents. I could hear it when my mom was on the phone with my grandmother or my aunt. I could hear them talking about this intense thing. And I just remember being so fearful and having nightmares and not even being able to understand. And so I think sometimes we don't realize that, the kids pick up that stuff and they're not going to say, hey, by the way, I noticed that you're feeling a lot of stress and I'm a little concerned about your emotional health. I mean, maybe you have a kid that's tuned in, probably not. You might. I mean, good for you if you do. But I think most kids just begin to wonder like what's going on, and they feel fearful and they don't want to add to your stress because they sense that you're stressed. And so I think if you can say, what do I need to do to guard that, to monitor that in myself, maybe to dial down some things, like we've talked about it before, but maybe it's time to cut out the social media, dial down the 24/7 news coverage. And the truth is, and maybe this is because I'm a leader, and I know Suzanne knows this, is when you serve in leadership, you know how difficult it is to weigh out every opinion, and that the truth is you will never make a decision that everyone will like. You will always make someone mad. Because we aren't all unified in our mindset. If we were all unified in our mindset, being a leader would be so much easier. And so I think when we're blasting out, I mean, we can say, I don't really care for that opinion, but if we start assassinating someone's character instead of just saying, I personally don't agree with that, versus, they're such a moron, they're an idiot, how could they think this? And, which basically, just rips down another person instead of saying like, I don't personally agree with this. I wish they would take a look at this. But then again, I have to go, well, they're really, really, really smart people think we ought to stay in place, and really, really smart people think we ought to get back. So there are smart people on both sides of the fence, each with their own information. And the truth is this thing is unfolding and we're learning as we go. And so I think, maybe just to even be aware of that, of the difference between having a strongly held opinion versus assassinating someone's character, and how that just creates that negative, kind of just a vitriol. It's just, just this negative mess that starts swirling inside of us, and we get more and more amped up instead of like calm. And so I guess it's just maybe a good idea to take some of that. My counselor's all about the whole mindfulness and guided meditation, just taking some time to meditate. Maybe you need to turn on, there's so many of those out there right now, the wonderful meditation things in mindfulness, to just take a deep breath. One of the big things we talked about this week in an interview we did was for our congregation was this thing will die away in a year or so. I mean, at some point it's going to go away, and don't do any permanent damage to your relationships, and I think that's just something for all of us to keep in mind is, what we're doing now will have an effect later. And it's not just about how we feel about the virus, but how we treat one another. So let's be kind. Let's be respectful. Let's trust that if someone is holding a really strong view that is opposite of ours, there's probably a really good reason they do.
It's good. I said you could, as leaders, we can look out there with the school world, and you can find opinions that no school is going to go back to school for 2 years. You can find opinions that we're going to go back in August and everything's going to be just fine. I mean, so, as you said, all of us have to find what we believe to be the best solution for Kansas City, Gladstone, what we want to do. And I think, I guess I'm speaking for Brenda and Amy here a little bit too, but we really, behind the scenes, we are, debating every negative thing that could possibly happen. We're debating changes that may have to be made, etc. But outwardly, to the community who hopefully is watching right now, our job is to stay positive. Our job is to think the best. I mean, that's what we're here for. And so I think sometimes that's hard because when we put out a positive vibe, there are people that don't like that. There are people that want to hear your 256 plans and every negative thing that could go wrong. And I think, even if we're planning for that, our job is to make sure that from our students and faculty and community that we are positively going forward, and we're looking for whatever the normal August looks like in our minds. So, I mean, I don't know, as kind of the last question of the day, how do you help our community or anyone listening out there know that trust is important and that we have to be positive? Because if we just spoke negatively about the future, I mean, I don't know. I personally wouldn't be able to handle that. So, yeah, there's no right answer, but it's just the projection that you have to the community.
Yeah, I think leaders are leaders because they're usually the people who are willing to walk into the storm, right? They calculate the risks, they make the best plan possible, and then they're gonna go forward into that storm and say, we'll figure it out. Like they're gonna take the hill, and they confront the brutal facts. They do the best with what they can, they calculate the risks, and they're willing to take the hits and say, we're gonna do the best we can, but we're gonna keep going up this hill. We're going to keep going in this direction. And I think so I tell people is, you have to be able to say at the end of the day, do I trust my leader? Do I trust whether that's my local leader, my church leader, my school leader? Do I trust that this person has my best interest at heart, that they've done everything they can, and that I hope that COVID has shown us the reality is you don't have control over everything. And you can make every plan to the nth degree and still something could go wrong. So a leader, you're never going to have an answer for every single thing. We're just not. I mean, even if you're staying at home, there's not an answer for every single thing. Presumably people are still getting groceries delivered. There's a chance that you didn't quite get everything cleaned off and you might still get it. So like you can plan it to the nth degree and still have something go wrong. You can go back to work and still customers may not show up. I mean, so I think there's a reality that a leader has to say, I'm taking in the information. I'm not sticking my head in the sand. I'm confronting the brutal facts. I've sought wisdom, and now I'm going to make the best possible plan I can for my community. And I hope that people will trust me as a leader to ask questions. I mean, respectfully ask a question like, have you thought of this scenario? And the truth is we might have calculated that risk and said, and it's a risk we're willing to take, and I think that's what it all comes down to is, do you trust your leaders to lead through? And, obviously my first experience with you, Suzanne, I mean, obviously I trust you, but my first experience with Suzanne is, I think, how long had you been there when, the school took a hit on a tornado, or whatever that thing was, that microburst.
Yeah. It was an F1 tornado, right? Yeah.
I mean, it was just whatever that thing was that tore off, where my kid would have been hiding had it been a daytime thing. And just watching like, hey, I mean, you take the blowback and then you go, okay, well, let's just get up. We got to get to work. Let's take that hill. It's a problem to be solved. We got to keep moving. And I think that's why leaders are in the places they're in, is that they can get up and keep going forward. And the truth is, you got to ask yourself, do I trust my leader to have done as much as they can? But there's still a risk every time. As a leader, we're not going to have all the answers. That's what it means to lead in the face of adversity, is you got to just go with what you know and trust that you've done as much as you can and then move forward.
Well, it's an exciting time, I think. Heading into next week, I think there are new problems to be solved. And, I think we're going to see lots of people excited and scared once again, and having to make decisions for their own families. So I was writing earlier, and I think, COVID is just presenting challenges that are, we're past the crisis. I think the emergency and crisis. Now we've hit this new normal, and that new normal is going to continue to change every so many weeks. So we're all going to grow from this. That's for sure. Well, once again, we appreciate your wisdom. I think we're getting free counseling, Brenda and Amy, from Shannon every week. That's why we do this. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So
well, I
thank
love
you so
hanging
much.
out with you girls. So
Yeah.
All right. Well, everyone have a great week. And until next time, take care. Thanks.
Thank you, Shannon.
thank you guys.